Given the hybrid, conventional and nuclear threats posed by an aggressive and revisionist Russia, along with uncertainties surrounding the future of the United States on the global stage, European security requires new thinking. Therefore, I now very much look forward to our next session, Rising to the Challenge, European Coherence on the Defensive. I am honored to welcome our distinguished speakers to discuss this important topic. They are Yuriko, Minister for Defense of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, Władysław Bartoszewski, Polish Secretary of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Hélène Conway-Mouret, Member of Parliament and Vice President of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense and Armed Forces in the Senate of the French Republic, and Jürgen-Joachim von Sandrath, Commander of the NATO Multinational Corps Northeast in Szczecin. This panel will be moderated by my wonderful colleague Alisa Vogt, Program Director, International Affairs at Körber-Stiftung. The stage is yours.
Minister Backes, Secretary of State Bartoszewski, Senatrice Conway-Mouret, and General von Sandrath. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me on stage today. As the conversations today have already touched upon, the results of the US elections, among other developments, increased the urgency to bolster European defense, as the next Trump administration is likely to pull back and largely leave Europe to Europeans. Also, the urgency to be capable of supporting Ukraine if the US were to reduce or stop their aid. In this panel, we want to dive a bit deeper, become a bit more technical. So in the next 60 minutes, you can expect us to, first of all, I will ask General von Sandrath to speak a bit about the threats that Europe is facing from the East. And then the panel will examine the hurdles European defense has been facing. Why are we not there? Why are we not there where we wanted to be? And then we will look ahead and become as concretely as possible with what steps need to be taken to change things, to progress. The last 15 minutes, as always, are reserved for your questions from the audience and also for our live stream viewers. Just send them in via the hashtag #BerlinForum. General von Sandrath, the NATO Multinational Corps Northeast is quite literally at the forefront of European defense. And before we talk about the defense, I would like to ask you to share what kind of threat scenarios you're currently discussing or preparing for in Szczecin.
Yes, thank you very much for having the opportunity to present the northeastern flank. Multinational Corps Northeast is stationed in Szczecin since 25 years, and the area of responsibility puts together Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and the northern part of Poland, including Suwałki Gap. In total, we have a common borderline to Russia and Russia influence area about 2,200 kilometers. So we have a clear idea about the threat, and we share that idea with our wonderful host nations. First statement is we are not at peace anymore in multiple aspects. That's important to know. Secondly, the threat, even though Russia is heavily engaged in Ukraine, is still present with the remaining capabilities Russia has on the other side of the borderline that we are looking at. And this threat is emerging every day because Russia has clearly stated it will reconstitute and reinforce its investments in defense and its defense spendings and the defense structure significantly, and we can already observe that. Currently, I don't expect a military attack and a classical military attack on NATO in my area of operation. However, there are multiple opportunities below the threshold of, I would call it a total war scenario that can be either hybrid or just a limited regional land grab that can stress test NATO. All I say, the Baltic states together with Poland and the Baltic Sea region itself is for me, but I think that requires to the host nation as well, the most exposed geography in NATO and alliance territory, and that applies for Europe the same way. In a summary, the threat is present, the threat is developing, and we need to be ready not only for a scenario that emerges or that pops up in 2029, 2030, or whenever you think Russia has reconstituted. I strongly recommend to be ready tonight, and tonight is everything between now and the next 36 months, because I consider this our weakest period.
Thank you very much for this first-hand assessment of the threat in the East. You said ready, better be ready tonight. That underlines the urgency, once again, that action is needed. So, in his hearing before the European Parliament, Andreas Kubilius, the new Commissioner for Defense and Space, highlighted the challenges for European defense, and amongst others, he talked about the significant underinvestment and that strategic rivals, such as China and Russia, are outpacing us on defense spending. He also said that the European defense equipment market is highly fragmented. So let's dive into these two aspects. Minister Backes, before you became Minister of Defense, you were Minister of Finance, so I would like to call on your expertise on this, especially since you just recently outlined a roadmap for how Luxembourg will increase the defense budget from currently 700 million to 1.4 billion in 2030. As we all know, a lot of NATO member states are struggling with the 2%, and looking forward, this will probably only be the minimum amount of investment. So also here, the urgency has grown, and I would like to ask you, and from your experience, what are the challenges and what financial tools are needed now to overcome this as quickly as possible?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here today. I think we are faced with an absolute urgency. There have been, Crimea is now dates 10 years back. The fully fledged war is on now since almost 1,000 days. So we have known for a very long time what we have to do, and we are not there yet. Speaking for Luxembourg, yes, I'm former finance minister. The challenges are also huge. We have come a very long way. For Luxembourg, we have tripled our defense spending in the past 10 years. We will double it again in the next couple of years, but we need to do it together. We are talking about 2%. You addressed 2%. Is 2% going to be enough? Perhaps not, but we're all in this together, and we need to use all the tools that are at our disposal at the national level, but also at the European level. Discussions are underway also with the European Investment Bank, what its role can be. You addressed the fact that now for the first time there's the proposal to have a European Defense Commissioner. So there we were, again, have to be focusing on another aspect of European defense, and that is the industrial policy, which is absolutely indispensable. But whatever we do, in the European Union, I think it needs to be absolutely complementary and not in opposition to what we have in place and what we need to further develop also on NATO level. So I think the urgency is absolutely there. Mr. Kubilius has announced a white paper. Looking very much forward to seeing that in the next couple of months. But I think back to 2017, Jean-Claude Juncker, as the president of the European Commission, had also published a white paper. We know exactly what we have to do, but we have to get there quickly and we have to get there together.
Mr. Bartoszewski, maybe you want to add on that?
Yes, I'll add on that. But first, I saw you being startled after the general said something. Ready to fight tonight. This is normal NATO soldiers saying, we are ready to fight tonight, if you are in a NATO army. It's real. 2%. It was decided by NATO countries in 2014 at a NATO summit. In 2020, 6 nation states spent 2%. In 2024, 20 out of 32 members spent 2%. Is it enough? No. Do you remember Willy Brandt, the chancellor of SPD, peace-loving, Nobel Peace Prize? How much money did he spend on defense? 3.6%. How many soldiers did he have in Western Germany? 900,000. How many battle tanks did he have? 5,000. Where are we now? We have a long to go. How much Poland spent on defense? This year 4.2, next year 4.7. You can say percentage don't matter because it's real money. In real money, we are 5th largest spender in NATO. We've got the 3rd largest army in NATO after US and Turkey. And we also bought an insurance policy. We are buying $50 billion worth of arms from the United States of America, which makes America more keen to maintain the links with the rest of European NATO. And we have to do it all together. There are nations with gigantic GDPs, like Germany, which are spending relatively little. The 100 billion euros was a great idea, but as the general will confirm, you have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. That's on the money.
That's on the money. Wonderful, thank you. Maybe speaking of the US, then I add on another question. President-elect Trump is known for wanting to arrange deals, and right now there's a fear among many in Europe that he will try to make bilateral agreements with member states and thereby weakening the unity and the integration of Europe. Do you share that fear, and what do you say? What should be the strategy to not make that happen? Let that happen.
First of all, do what Poland did and engage financially with America. Secondly, there is one fear in Europe that the United States, and is justified, the United States is going to turn towards Asia in its next term. Get closer to AP4, Asia Pacific 4, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. Because we are now talking to them, and they realize that if Ukraine falls, they are the next in the battle zone. So they want to Ukraine not to fail. Use them as a leverage towards the Americans. That we are not talking about one small piece of land somewhere in Europe. We are talking about the connection between Europe and Asia, and we are as concerned about Southeast Asia and South China Sea as is America. But so show that it's not a matter of sending troops, like previous speaker said, it's a matter of saying we will contribute to global security. Because if China sees that Russia can win and take over Ukraine, China will say we can do the same. That's what people tell me in South Asia countries. And the second thing is, and that is something which would have been true irrespective who won the presidency, we will be judged by our relationship with China. If we are not willing to disengage not decouple, because I don't think that's feasible, but at least do some de-risking from China, we will have a problem with the US administration. I'd like to point out that the current volume of assets of Germany in China is considered to be around €500 billion, 500 billion euros. Americans know it. And they say, if you want to deal with us and have our security, you have to disengage somewhat from country. The Americans don't say, put money in America. Americans will say, remove yourself from China. And this is something which all of us have to keep in mind. Otherwise, I can guarantee bad relationship with President Trump.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so you said engage financially. I expected you to say something about how to enhance trust between the member states, etc. So I find it very interesting that you bring in this aspect of the turn to Asia.
Here we have to take care of ourselves. And we already have a northeastern flank of NATO, which consists of the UK, Scandinavian countries, Baltic states, us, Romania. But we need more of these initiatives because it's essential that we can take care of ourselves. And I don't want to talk too much because it's an issue of standardizing production of arms. The general was mentioning before that it's completely impossible to have a situation that we can produce 155 millimeter shells for artillery, but those shells do not fit all NATO guns. I mean, this have to be sorted out.
Okay, we will talk more about the initiatives that need to be taken later on. First, I would like to switch to one topic, and that is the industry, that is the defense market. Madame Conway-Mouret, you have not only been the vice chair of the French Senate, the vice chairman of the Foreign Affairs, Defense and Armed Forces Committee, but also the rapporteur for the Armed Forces Equipment Budget since 2017. So you've been at this intersection or at this linkage between military industry and politics for quite a while. What learnings or what can you share with us? What makes it so difficult to integrate the defense market better, to work together, which obviously also has a cost efficiency question to it?
Well, there are a lot of questions in the one question. First of all, I would like to think that we're not considered just as customers, but as an ally to the United States. And I think that is a very important thing to say, that yes, of course, we can buy American equipment, and we do, all of us. But at the same time, from this morning, I've heard a lot of people saying, you need to come out of this adolescent state that you're in, looking after our own identity, wondering whether we're able to go forward, not being or feeling not competent enough and so on, and having the American ally all the time saying, get hold of yourself. We cannot just be a crutch to you. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. And that's what I've heard since this morning. And I think, well, the only experience that I have indeed for the past few years is trying to assess the military needs, and I spent a lot of time with the armies, traveling around the world as well to visit French bases and see, the, I suppose, involvement that we have in the various alliances that we've been involved in, and talking to industry to see that they actually produce to respond to those needs, and then, of course, the government, who is to bring the credits to actually buy the equipment, as the French state, as is the case in most countries, is the first customer of the industry. Now, for the past 20 years, of course, the budget has been the adjustment, where the credits were given to education, to social issues, and so on, simply because we were at peace. And there was no reason, and certainly great difficulties to explain to the public opinions that security and defense ought to be a priority. So it was, those credits were always used for something else. Thus, the state we're in today, with indeed a kind of a catching up to do, realization that we have underspent for too long, and the Ukraine war is the wake-up call for us all to assess exactly what we have and what we need. But I will finish by saying that I don't think dollars or euros win wars. It's men and materials that win wars. And men, it's, again, population, which is capable of supporting its army and prepare it, get involved, boosting the reserves, and, of course, giving the proper equipment. And we go back to what we have been talking since this morning, which is, you know, money that we need to invest. But while it is very important, I think, and it's the politician's hat that I'm putting on again, it is for us politicians to engage with our populations that we represent, to explain to them today that, yes, indeed, there are sacrifices to be made because the defense budget ought to be a priority, but it goes far beyond. It's an individual investment that we also need to see within the population. And looking at Russia today, Russia has a war economy. The whole country is at the service of, you know, supporting that war. We are at war. We are, but we're not at the same time. It's a kind of war by proxy that we're fighting. And we need to be very careful that our populations don't get tired of thinking, yes, the war is still going on, but it's not our concern. And that's why it is very important that we have this type of forum where we can repeat, but repetition is very important, I think, that Ukraine is not just about a country being invaded by another. It's a part of the European continent being attacked, and therefore it is all of our concerns. And that's why we need to get involved. And indeed, we prepared, and there are threats to be heard from the military that we need to be prepared for.
Mm-hmm. And if we, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Maybe I absolutely agree, and I think very often we see two things that are standing of the way of a further better working together in terms of European defense is national sovereignty and also national champions, which are two very legitimate things to defend on member state level, but which are going to be hindering us in working together for European security in the future. We know exactly how fragmented we are. We know this since a long time that we need to standardize. Diversity is a very good thing in the European Union, and I also say that as a gender equality and diversity minister. But in terms of defense, it is hindering us working together. Investments which are failing, but also, as you said, we need to have society on board in what we do here. And I think there is not enough recognition, and perhaps we are not communicating it well enough, how close we are to a war, if we are not already in a war, because there is constant hybrid warfare. So communication also with our societies is extremely important in everything that we do. And perhaps just a reference to China. We know exactly the US position on China that you mentioned, but we must also recognize that there is not a single problem and a challenge in this world that we will solve without China. Not a single one. From climate change to other matters, but maybe that's beyond the scope of this talk.
Then maybe I play the ball back to you, because I find that question of the public opinion very interesting, because I think, as you said, it's important for politicians, and we talked about this earlier as well, very important to explain, to tell the story. But I think another part of it is to show to the public that the defense spending is being spent in an effective way. So yeah, if you have further thoughts on that, also how to deal with that question of the national champions, how to get into, because I mean, as you said, it's clear that they're there, but how to deal with that in the different member states, there's different national champions, and how to bring that together, how to convince everyone involved that it's better to cooperate.
Yeah, well, defense, like health, are the core of the country's sovereignty. Yeah. And yet with the pandemic, we realized very quickly we're all trying to be in competition with each other. And then we realized very quickly that we were actually far more effective together to get the vaccines and so on. With the pandemic was one, Brexit was another one, The UK had a strategy to divide the Europeans. It didn't happen. And in the end, the Europeans together got a good deal. And, so when it comes to, I think that were two tests that we were put to. And therefore, we proved that we can do it. So now I think we have no choice, because individually we can spend billions when we have them. And I'm not too sure that a lot of countries have those billions to spend outside of our own economies, not creating jobs for us, not getting that public opinion with us, saying, well, look, we're investing in defense, but you're going to have a job. You will be trained as a skilled worker or engineer, whatever, that will lead to you producing these equipments and so on, and protecting our sovereignty. So that's the second question. And the third question was about the champions, trying to just cover it all. Yes, I am very much in favor of having European champions, because we have a problem with having too many pieces of industries, too many, if you like, people in competition with each other, producing different equipment. The Americans say, well, we have one tank, and in France, or not in France, but in Europe, you have so many tanks, and therefore it doesn't work. So, yes, we have to come to that, but to come to that, we need to have a European defense fund that is not funded with a few millions. Remember, we had a target of 13 billion. Suddenly, it came back down to 8 billion over 5 years for 25 or 27 countries. I mean, it makes no sense. We need billions of investments for innovation, for research, and developing industry that responds to the needs of our armies in Europe. That doesn't prevent us from buying other equipment outside. The Americans, certainly, the Koreans, Israel. I mean, there are a lot of countries producing very good equipment and bringing ourselves up to the level that we need collectively. But I think we need to build trust among ourselves that we can indeed do it as an entity, a European entity, and stop that dreadful competition among industry within Europe that prevents us. It's one of the major hurdles, in the same way as countries have protected their defense, kind of secrecy and so on. And all of that has prevented us from moving on and giving, the state of the analysis that's going which is given to us today, given that, well, we're not where we should be. That's what we have heard. I mean, that's a big lesson. Too little, too late. Mm-hmm. But I hope it's not too late, because we need to wake up for tomorrow.
So, sorry, may I respond to that quickly? Very quickly. First of all, yes, we should have a defense industry, European defense industry, and yes, this industry will produce jobs, and yes, this would produce GDP, and yes, it would help us. But, as the General said, we don't have time to build it because we need this stuff, some of the stuff now. Secondly, you are 100% right.
But we have it. We just need to spend.
We do not have the numbers.
Oh.
Hey, I give you the example of self-propelled howitzer, the César, which is fantastic. And how many did you build? 72. And now that the war started and the howitzer works, you decided to build another 72. So I would like to ask to follow Monsieur Lecornu, who said all the production of material and services in France should take military needs first and then civilian. Because the Russians have a war economy, as you said, and we should move in that direction for a foreseeable future, because threat is long-standing. Yes, absolutely. Secondly, you are absolutely right. Europe, if necessary, united. Apart from these two cases you mentioned, I can say financial crisis 2008-2009, we managed to overcome it. And when the Russians invaded Ukraine, we did pull ourselves together, and we did organize fantastic humanitarian trade and military help to Ukraine, and your EU is in the forefront of it. So we shouldn't just say we are the horrible bunch of 27 states. No, we do quite well if we actually get impulse to do something like that. So
perfect. That's a perfect segue to the question I just wanted to ask you, because I think it is important to say that there have been a lot of initiatives on the European level since the Trump 1 administration, but still last week, I don't know how many times I heard the word wake-up call once again. So if we bind that together, what, in your opinion, what needs to be these, let's take 3 most important things that need to happen now?
Well, first thing is the money. As Hélène said, you say first 13 billion, then 8 billion, then God knows how, spread it over 27 countries and God knows how many years. That is not going to do it. No. We need to have a sizable fund of money which says devoted precisely to the development of the best arms and munitions. We should not produce everything in every country because that way is waste and chaos. Figure out who actually produces the best, how it says, who produces potentially the best planes, who produces the best artillery, and concentrate on that and have common purchases. This is an anathema to EU countries. Common purchasing of weapons and munitions. Always every country desisted. No, we should control it ourselves. We have to pull together. We have, whatever, 450 million people. We are bigger than the States. Our economy is about $10 trillion less than the States, but this is gigantic. If we pull ourselves together and said, actually, there is a need. And the general put it right. The threat is here, is present, and it's not going away. We are getting into a long period of Cold War, which already turned hot in some places and may turn hot again very soon elsewhere. So we have to start thinking, what percentage did United States spend during the Second World War at the height of the war in 43, 44 of the GDP? And that was a very large GDP, 45%. We don't want to go there. We don't want to have to go there. But if we spend a few percent more now and put it together, Ellen is right. I mean, you don't produce 20 tanks in different places. The only reasons we didn't buy Leopards, but we got K2 and from Korea and Abrams from the States, is that because they were available now. And the first Leopard could reach us in 2027. But that has to change.
Maybe you want to come in at that point, and from your perspective, also one of the small states in the EU, what role can Luxembourg play to really make a difference this time? That we take this wake-up call seriously and work towards a truly common security and defense policy.
I agree. Time is very much an issue. We know how many different types of weapon system we have in the EU. So again, coming back to the European champions, which are necessary, but let's not forget in all of this. And yes, again, time is an issue, but we should make sure that also SMEs are really involved in the buildup, and that across EU countries everywhere. What can a small country contribute? Money, investment, of course, that every country should, small countries as well. Having boots on the ground, our troops on the ground, and in Luxembourg we have much less than in bigger countries, of course, but even there, we as a small country, we are contributing. This is a matter of engagement, it's a matter of solidarity, where also Grand Duchy of Luxembourg has its boots on the ground, for example, in Romania, for example, that under German control, command in Lithuania. We are present in a bunch of missions across the world, including Irini. We are taking part in the Formation, Ausbildung, how do you say it in English? To train, thank you, to train Ukrainian soldiers. All of that is something where small countries, including Luxembourg, can contribute. But also, as you rightly mentioned, we don't all need to be doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. We have our specializations. Luxembourg, for example, is very much specialized in satellites. Satellite communication, these are capabilities that we can put at the disposal of allies, and which we do. We will have Earth observation pictures as well that we will make as soon as they are ready, also available to allies. So these are very concrete and extremely important contributions that we as a small country, can put at the disposal of our allies and partners. So with every country doing what it does best, and with us really trying to become further interoperable, and I also agree, joint procurement is absolutely fundamental. We have an SPA agency of NATO. Luxembourg is the host of that agency. There's so much more also NSPA could do in terms of joint procurement, and it's absolutely indispensable.
Mm-hmm. Madam, you wanted to come in?
Yeah.
I would like to give you one question with that as well, because I find that point very important to say that not all have to do the same thing, because I'm always interested in hearing sort of which capital, which nation can lead on what. Are there certain formats that need to be used? To both of you, could the Weimar Triangle, in which form can it support these aspects? Yeah.
But that's why we need a European fund, which is probably properly funded, because we should not have a European project based on a bilateral agreement between two of the European countries. For me, a true European project should involve most of the European countries. And if we had the funds, proper funds at the European level, it means helping to bring those countries that have not developed an industry or that have a specialism. I'm just thinking about Estonia, for instance, which is absolutely top class in everything to do with cyber. If we have a European project, you would have Estonia providing its expertise, and then all the other countries providing the expertise they may have in their country, developed and helped to be developed even further through this European fund that everybody would have kind of put money into. And that is one way of having champions and not having this kind of competition among Europeans, which prevents us from moving on or lead us to an impasse where indeed we produce each our own goods for the use that we have to make of them. So I think we need to project ourselves, and that's the dilemma that politicians have, torn between short term, we need to buy now, and long term, can we project ourselves and realize that in 10 years' time, yes, we will have champions, but we need to put everything in place now. And we do have the instruments. They do exist. They have been put in place after, well, for us, 2015, after the first terrorist attacks in France, where suddenly there was a kind of an awareness that, yes, we could be attacked on our own territory. And therefore, security defense became important. And that's how we were able to reverse the budget and, have a proper budget with a law that we vote every 5 years that gives us visibility as to the spending that we have. But I'm not sure other countries have that. And we have it because, again, history or the course of things pushed us to do it. And I think that's how Europe moves on, by being kicked, hard, and then we move. But this time, I think we have absolutely no other way but moving together unitedly.
Mm-hmm. I would like to give it to you also the question on who could lead on what, and then I would like to give it to the general to speak a bit about from everything we talk about, all these initiatives, sort of what are the priorities for you from your position?
Well, it depends. I mean, yes, Estonia is great in cybersecurity. It's a NATO center for cybersecurity located there. Yes, Germany has a long history of producing excellent tanks. Yes, the French can produce some howitzers. Now, we have decided to buy some things, but now we're now renegotiating the contracts with the Koreans. So it says, yes, we are going to produce howitzers and tanks, Korean tanks in Poland, but we are going to later produce them in Poland. So in the 10 years' time, we want 50% of every euro spent to stay in Poland, in the arms industry. So that's another way of doing it. But I want to get back to something which was fundamental, which you asked a question, and Hélène mentioned that we cannot increase spending on the military drastically, which we need, without the consent of the people. We do not live in Russia. We do not live in a dictatorship. we have to carry the people with us. So we have to propose something, explain to them that this is absolutely essential, that after 30 years of peace dividend, now we are facing a prolonged period of war, which will turn nasty. The general was mentioning maybe 18 months. Nasty for the NATO alliance, not for the Ukrainians who have been suffering since 2014. And the public has to get the grasp of that. And the only people who can do that are the politicians and the media to help. Because if public doesn't understand it, you know, living in a front line country, because just the war is just across our border, we don't have this problem because both the current government and the current opposition fully supports it. Because the public is, as Minister Sikorski, my boss, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, said last week, we will not be enslaved by Russia again. And this is a common perception. And for us, every state in America has its motto. And the motto which could be used for Poland is the motto from the small state of New Hampshire. And people in New Hampshire have a motto: live free or die. And this is something which we will not be better read than that. It does not apply to us.
Now you both passed on the question on the Weimar Triangle. I noticed that, but we can get back to that later on. General, back to you. So from all the initiatives,
how do we know?
What are your priorities from your position?
Before I come to that, two remarks. Thank you very much for the comment that we cannot outsource security to military. It's a whole of society and a whole of government approach. So we all need to know, our people need to know, what are we willing to fight for. And if we don't have decided that in a consequent way across the societies, we get in trouble. Then Russia's strength is not its capabilities. The Russia's strength emerges from our weakness. And that is the diverse, for example, the diverse perception, what is a threat? How threatened are we? And for me it is, whether it's 2%, 3%, 1.5%, to be honest, I don't care if I get what I need. So this percentage discussion is more or less dice. That's not good. So for me it is important they have a clear understanding what is required in order to achieve what we want. And the main task for me is I need to have everything to prevent war. Nobody wants to go to war. And if we have to go to war, we have to win. We cannot accept a static war frozen in our territory as we currently see that in Ukraine. That's why we need to have a clear understanding, how do we want to defend every inch of our territory? I think that is a critical question. Coming back to NATO and EU, no matter whether it's the EU organization or NATO, for me, currently, NATO is the only security alliance and that can deliver the accountable defense and readiness as the first security provider at D-Day. If we challenge that by bilateral cooperations, by preferred partnerships, we weaken the NATO alliance approach. EU currently, for me, is, if we speak about alliance defense, it is supporting, NATO and EU are in a supporting relationship in my mind, to my observation. And the EU, with its comprehensive capabilities, needs to support NATO to become and be the accountable first responder. That means no duplication of resources, a clearly investment into the NATO alliance as a truly integrated, collective, accountable, ready, willing to fight first responder at D-Day. The key questions that I ask myself every night in all what we do is what we do after we know what we are willing to fight for fit for purpose? Are our structures fit for purpose? Are our plans fit for purpose, either to prevent war or if we fail to prevent war, because deterrence fails, to win the war. Second is, what do we have to learn from Ukraine? And I learned from Ukraine as a poor cavalry officer that a purely defensive approach to defense is not fit for purpose to win the fight. And secondly is, do our plans rather speak the Russian language, or do we allow our plans to speak NATO language? And NATO is all about maneuver, become unpredictable. So we need to reconsider that. And how you now align EU and NATO, that is rather your task, ma'am. But you need to provide me and us soldiers what is required, and the societies what is required to be resilient, because it's more than tanks. It's about training. It's about getting societies resilient. It's about to get our territory ready for the fight, like we did in the Cold War. And that needs to be revitalized. That requires political leadership and clear statements.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to turn it to the audience. I already see the first question. Please briefly introduce yourselves and keep the questions short and precise if possible. I think the first question was over there, the lady in the third row. And if possible, address it to one of our panelists, please.
Yes. My name is Liliana Popescu. I'm from Romania, leading the Romanian Diplomatic Institute. I would like to remark that at least two of the speakers mentioned the importance of communicating with our own publics in the European Union. So I think this is a matter of strategic communication with our own publics, and I think this is a new situation. And as the Deputy Minister from Poland was saying, we are living in democracies. So we cannot proceed as Russia does, just shut up the minds and the mouth of the citizens. So my question is, because of the importance of the strategic communication, what are your countries doing in these terms? And I would like to say that I think that the crisis of trust in politicians has to be taken into account. The crisis of conventional media has to be taken into account. And just look at the results in the US, the presidential elections, what a role played social media and the sort of, kind of underground communication in which youth are involved. So I think this is a big challenge. Maybe it's undervalued. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I would collect a few questions. There's a question over here in the second row, please. Microphone is coming up.
Very good question.
Thank you. Maximilian Feske, German FMOD. Quick question to General von Sandrart. What would you say is your greatest single challenge to being fit for purpose, given your area of operations, and how do we fix it? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I saw a third question in the room over, yes, right over here.
Dan Fried, Atlantic Council for Władysław Bartoszewski. This is a heartening discussion. I mean, it's a bunch of Europeans talking about the need to rearm and build up defense industry. That's great. At what point do you think Europe, either individual countries or Commissioner Kubilius or combination, will be ready to have those kinds of discussions with the Trump team? Because this strikes me as a fruitful area of cooperation.
Thank you very much. Then how about, Mr. van Zandraat, we start with you on the question of purpose, then Mr. Bartoszewski on the last question, and then would you take the question on communication, social media? Yeah, perfect.
And so first of all, what is Are we fit for purpose and what is required if we are not to get fit or get fitter? First of all, not everything is negative. I'm now 3 years in command. If I look back to November 21 and see what has been achieved now, there's big progress. And that can make us confident that for the time being, at least in MSc Northeast, we are fit for purpose. We are ready and I sleep well. But if I look to the time race that you mentioned as well, so Russia is reconstituting and us is reconstituting from the peace dividend, then it is, and what does it need? We need to be quicker than Russia reconstitutes. And I think that is the challenge for the next 12 to 36 months, that we maintain the momentum that was kicked off with Vilnius summit. I think with Washington, we need to be careful that the momentum is not transitioned into a process that determines progress. Progress should always determine the process. And that is why I'm quite confident that in the next coming months, with a revision of plans and all the efforts that are undertaken, even in the entire procurement, where we will get even fitter for purpose. But good things are in place already. Trust me.
Mr. Bartoszewski.
Thank you for your question, Dan. As you well know, Poland had a very good, or Polish government had a very good relationship with President Trump in 2016, 2020. We maintained a good relationship, especially the previous government, but generally speaking, we have no problem with having contacts with the Republicans and Democrats because we always believed in bipartisanship. And we've already were looking to get in touch with him. And of course, we are in a slightly easier position because not only we spend lots of money on American arms, not only we have 10,000 American soldiers on our soil, and we have a gigantic links commercially and investment, American investment in Poland and so on. And also, not to beat around the bush, Pennsylvania voted Trump partly thanks to hundreds of thousands of Polish voters there, and he is aware of it. So we've got a good starting point. On top of that, he likes us. For whatever reason, he got enthusiastically received when he came to Poland in whatever 2017 or 2018, I think, and was enthusiastically received. And he appeared on television, I think last week, a week before the election, and he said, "I like Poland because the Poles like me." We fully intend to talk to his team at the moment, to make sure that we understand his concerns, and we are willing to talk to our partners in NATO to make sure that it works. But that is why I mentioned that we've maintained very close contacts now with the countries in Southeast Asia, because that's also a very good sign that we actually care about that area. So he can say, okay, so you understand the problem. So, but what will happen, God only knows, of course.
Mr. Backes, would you speak on the question on communication with the...
Communication with citizens is, of course, essential. Yes, we live in a democracy. We need to have the confidence of the people. I need to explain to Luxembourgish people, for example, why I'm this week passing a law to invest in more heavily armored vehicles for the purpose of a binational battalion that we are putting in place together with Belgium. This draft law is an investment of 2.6 billion euros, which is just a part of a succession of laws that I need to get through Parliament for investing in our national defense and into our collective defense. So for me, this communication with citizens is absolutely important. Why are we doing this? This needs to be explained. What are we fighting for? You raised the question earlier. We are fighting together for freedom, for a rules-based international system, for the rule of law. And we know that if we want peace, we need to prepare for war. This is a well-known saying, but this is exactly what we are doing now. So yes, we need to spend now and explain to citizens by spending now and perhaps preventing a war, it will also prevent us from bleeding later. I am also minister responsible for public works and mobility, and I would like to say to the people in my country, I would much rather invest in school infrastructure, into schools, into trams, into nice highways, and lots of wonderful things for mobility, but that's not the reality that we are living in today. That's why for all of our freedom, for the protection of the way we live, the way we have been used to living in freedom, we need to invest into our national and into our collective security. It is not so easy, but I think it is very understandable also for citizens. But those who are very active on social media, also in Luxembourg and beyond, saying that these are not the right investments, I think are very much on the losing end here.
Madame Conway-Mouret.
Yeah, that was, well, all the questions were excellent, but it's one point that we haven't spoken about. We've spoken about army equipment, tanks, planes, whatever, but it's easy to destabilize a democracy today from within through, indeed, social media, through propaganda, and we have done a lot of work in the French Parliament on looking at foreign interference, especially during election time, but not just. And also spying through cyber attacks can be racketing, but it can also be done on our very sensitive defense industry, for instance, and which requires investment to protect ourselves. But all of that is done insidiously and is, a way to weaken a democracy and destabilize it, maybe through its use. So we are putting protection, and being in a democracy is kind of difficult to respect free speech, and at the same time trying to contain it through the social media where there is little control. So we are at the moment putting pieces of legislation to try to control that. And the other point on the relationship with the United States, of course it's nice to be liked, but I'm not too sure that in a transaction that's really what matters most. Maybe we can start and have a drink afterwards, but what matters most, I think, is to be taken seriously. And I would like to think that Donald Trump will see the EU and European countries as true allies. And indeed, earlier on, there was reference to what's going on in the Red Sea at the moment, with the maritime commercial being affected by the Houthis attacks. Well, there are 3 ships there, 3 boats from Greece, Italy, and France, making sure that the Houthis attacks are being stopped and accompanying the boats, the big tankers that are coming through. So I would like to think that we are a strong ally, and that if there is a bargain, that yes, we have our place to be considered, that yes, if in the Indo-Pacific there is one problem one day, we will be there.
Thank you very much. As you can see, 1 hour with a stellar panel like this is very little time. But I think all of you will stay for a little while longer, and maybe the audience can still catch you in the coffee break.
Can I make one very quick comment?
Excuse me?
Can I make a very quick comment? Every single Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Europe has a cybersecurity unit, and we also have disinformation units, exactly to fight with the fake news. So we are doing our best.
Absolutely. I mean, on cyber, we could have an entire conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much. It was an honor and pleasure to be here with you. And now I hand it back to my colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you to the speakers.